with us today, so let's give them a warm welcome. Right on the pulpit there. Let me get you water. Okay.
Well, good morning. So good to be here, church. You know, I love that song. It's that Waymaker, right? Because God's a Waymaker. And the message that we've got for you guys this morning, really, it's about this God who we call being a Waymaker. And I don't know if you guys back there in the video booth, I did bring a video with us. I don't know if that's right. If we could use that to kind of kick off, is that something that we could start with? I've got a 3-minute video, which just kind of gives you an overview of what we do as missionaries, our family, and what we've done for the past number of years. So we served for our first few years in the country of Chile. We've been now for the past 9 years in the country of Costa Rica, and by the grace of God, this coming June of 2020, we will be Assemblies of God missionaries serving in the country of Cuba. You can keep going with that.
We're getting it.
Oh, okay.
We're just trying to get it from the computer there. We've got the file though.
And so we'll be Assemblies of God missionaries serving in the country of Cuba. And so this video, if you could just watch me on the screen here, just take 3 minutes to get an idea of who we are as missionaries.
There we go. Praise the Lord.
Well, hello, we're the Perez family. My name is Bob. My wife Missionary, these are our daughters.
Izzy, Priscilla.
And we're Assemblies of God missionaries serving in Latin America and the Caribbean. One of the very first things that I learned when we first became missionaries was that the name Bob, when it's pronounced in Spanish, does not sound quite that pretty.
Once we heard it pronounced a few times in Spanish, we realized that it sounded a little bit more like boob instead of Bob.
So from that day, I made the epic decision to become undercover agent Roberto Jose Perez. See, just kids, 18 years old, my wife and I said to her, I said, hon, I don't want you to marry me unless you're willing to become a missionary. And in my amazement, she said yes.
And I'm not going to tell you it was easy because I didn't know what it meant to be coming from a healthy family, and I didn't know what it meant to be married. And I didn't really know if I could trust this guy. You see, I grew up in Camden, New Jersey, surrounded by violence, and Camden is actually known for one of the most dangerous cities to live in all of the United States. I grew up with drug dealers that sold drugs right outside my front door. And right from there, my brother, 10 months after I was married, died on the streets of Philadelphia after he became a drug dealer, just like his dad. So for me to take that step to be a missionary and go into the unknown was a very scary place.
And so this is the amazing thing. It's just like Joseph said in Genesis in chapter number 50. You intended it to harm me, but God intended it for good. See, he's brought me to this position, says Joseph, so that I can save the lives of many people. Our ministry has always had a two-pronged focus. Number one is the restoration of women, girls, and boys that have been impacted by sexual abuse and forced prostitution, otherwise known as human trafficking. And then number two, creating strong, vibrant churches that understand the role they play, not only making an eternal difference, but also an earthly difference.
Because of my life experience, I've been given the opportunity to enter into some very dark places where very few people will ever go. Joined with the local police department, immigration, and FBI, and armed with my paid bulletproof vest, I'm able to go into brothels and literally face-to-face with ladies and share the gospel story of Jesus Christ. And there, for me, in a place where it felt like hell.
So friends, God's given us a sense of urgency, and we can't wait to get back. But the honest truth is we can't do it alone. Won't you play a part in helping us to reach people with the gospel, to plant churches and train leaders, and serve to restore the human dignity with the love of Jesus Christ? We need your prayers, your support, and your help. And most of all, we just want to say thank you so very much.
You know, one of the only reasons a video like that is possible, and I think one of the main reasons why we can be missionaries is friends, is we all got a story. Each and every single one of us, no matter what we've been through in life, no matter where we've grown up, no matter what kind of family we've had, we all have a story, right? You know, in this first slide you're going to see come up in once you get the PowerPoint presentation is a picture of my family. And you'll see my two daughters, Isabella and Priscilla. And here's the thing that I like about that picture is when you look at those images, and even the pictures you have in your house, is when you look at a picture, you think back to the story that was behind those images, right? And what I know is that when I look at that picture, there's a story behind each and every single one of us. I'll tell you, for me, my mission story started when I was just a kid, 12 years old. Blackwood, New Jersey, left-hand side of the church, 3 pews back in the middle of a worship service. God called me to missions. And it was in that moment God called me to mission, specifically to the country of Cuba. And it was one of these moments, I don't know about you, but I've never heard the audible voice of God. Never heard the audible voice of God. But it was one of those moments where I just knew God was tugging on my heart. And God was speaking to my heart to become a missionary. And a missionary specifically to the country of Cuba. But here's the thing, I think that sometimes when we try to follow God, and maybe you can agree with me this morning, maybe not, but I think that when you try to follow God, oftentimes, look, it's like you're just kind of navigating your way through the dark, and you're just kind of reaching here and reaching there, and you're like, but God, where in the world are you?
Yeah.
God, where do you want me to go? And I think that even in ministry, even as a pastor, as an evangelist, as a missionary, I think that so many times that's how it is. You're just kind of grappling your way through the dark. And I want to make 2 suggestions here this morning. Number 1, if you look at this next slide, it says that there's going to be times, in the very next one, it says, there's going to be times when you come home and it seems like God causes you to be accelerated through His provision, through people, in circumstances. And I know that in our lives, in my wife's life, in mine, there have been those moments where God has just blown us away through His provision, through people and circumstances. And so for us, look, I was 26 years old. I got before the Assemblies of God Executive Committee, and I said, guys, look, I was 6 years old when God called me to, 12 years old when God called me to missions, specifically to the country of Cuba. And this is kind of the call that God has laid upon my heart. There was no audible voice. There was no big thunderous storm in heaven, but I knew that God was calling me. And I sit with these guys at the table, and I share with them that this tug in my heart. And you know what they tell me? They say, Bob, look, Cuba, it's a closed country. You can't go there. We can't send you as missionaries. And then secondly, look, here's the other thing. You just don't have the tool set that we're looking for. And so as I sat at that table, I'm just like blown away, right? Because I'm like, this is where God's called me, but these guys are telling me no. And they go, you know, but we have another opportunity in the country of Cuba. In the country of Chile. And so if you guys would be willing, we would be more than happy to send you guys to the country of Chile to serve as missionaries. And so yeah, you know, we raised our hands and said, you know what, if that's the door that God is opening, then that's the door that we want to go to. And so we got to the country of Chile. We worked in the desert north, in the Atacama region of the desert region, and there were no other missionaries in that area. And one of the places that I love to work is where there are no other missionaries. Places where it's kind of hard, right? And there's a lot to be done, but there's nobody there, and it's just not being done. And so I said, you know, we go to Chile. We begin to work in that area, and God gave us incredible success. But as you'll see here in the next slide, it says that despite that, there was always a desire deep in my wife's heart, a desire to work with women and girls who had been involved in sexual abuse and exploitation, forced prostitution, human trafficking. And as a woman, to be honest, look, her natural inclination was to stay as far away from that ministry as possible. She didn't want anything to do with it. She tried to keep her distance, but what happens is we finish up our very first term in the country of Chile. We get a phone call from the guy that was the area director for Central America. He said, hey, would you guys consider coming to Central America, to Costa Rica specifically, to work in the area of human trafficking? And here's what I've learned about God in 40 years of life. You never want to tell God never. And you say, why? Because I think that the moment you tell God no, the moment you tell God never will it happen, that's kind of the position where God puts you. You know, and that's one of the reasons I said that I will never say that I'm never going to be a children's pastor, because I know that the moment I do, that's where God is going to have us. And so we get this call, and we make this transition to Costa Rica, and God just literally blew us away through His provision, through people, and circumstances. See, what happens is we get to Costa Rica specifically to work in human trafficking. The Assemblies of God wasn't doing anything, wasn't addressing that area of need in the country of Costa Rica. The United States Department of State in 2010 put out a report stating that the Costa Rica government wasn't doing enough to address the demand for commercial sex. The child sex tourism was a serious problem, and so we get to the country specifically to work in these areas. And here's how God blows us away. There's a woman that's there that God brought 25 years earlier from the country of Chile to Costa Rica to start a foundation, specifically to work with victims of human trafficking and ladies and boys and girls in prostitution. Wow. And so what happens is we form this relationship with this lady who's from Chile, and she goes to us one day, she goes, Bob, you know what the thing is? I would have never accepted to work with you guys had you never been missionaries in my home country of Chile. Wow. Believe it or not, worked in my hometown in the desert north of Chile.
Wow.
Amen.
And so the year we get there in 2010, I just said that the United States Department of State puts out a report. One of the things that they said was that Costa Rica was needing to develop a shelter for victims of human trafficking. Right in the very year when we get to Costa Rica to work in that very area, this report comes out. And right in that very year, the Costa Rican government gave to the foundation a grant for $250,000 to purchase a piece of property. Listen to this. Where they could build a shelter for victims of human trafficking. The very reason that we got to Costa Rica. I mean, even as you look at in the very next picture, you're going to see kind of the foundation. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have that slide. But it's a foundation of a shelter that we were building for victims of human trafficking. We had incredible investment. Things were just going absolutely phenomenal for us in Costa Rica. And it was like all of the pieces of the puzzle were just fitting together perfectly. But as it says in this next one here, there's going to be days where the story that God has for you may mean that sometimes it looks like you're falling into nothing more than a big, huge, gigantic, enormous pit of despair. You know, for us, we got to Costa Rica, look, that perfect, absolutely perfect. The pieces of the puzzle fit together. God was just working, man, I don't know, miracle after miracle. You couldn't pay to make some of the things happen that took place. And we just knew that we were right smack dab center in God's will. But as I say there, when you follow Jesus, there's going to be days of incredible enthusiasm, incredible excitement. But friends, when you follow Jesus, there's also going to be days where it seems like God is nowhere to be found. And so one day we stepped into a board meeting. And the same lady that God had prepared 25 years earlier to leave Costa Rica or to leave Chile and move to the country of Costa Rica, she gets there. She comes into this board meeting and she came in with a plan and an agenda of her own. And that plan was to get rid of the entire board of directors, to get rid of pretty much the entirety of the staff. And as we sat at the table that day, I realized, there's some financial, some ethical concerns, and we can't continue on in this project. We can't continue. 8 years of our life are invested here with the ladies and with the kids. My wife, week after week, every weekend, she hosted a youth group for kids that were in high-risk areas, kids whose moms were victims of trafficking, whose moms were involved in prostitution. And week after week, she's with the youth and she's with the ladies doing one-on-one counseling. And that day in that board meeting, we had to make a decision, probably the hardest decision of our lives, and that was to separate away from the foundation. But here's what I didn't realize. What I didn't realize was that decision, because of these concerns, was going to practically, literally devastate our family for the next 12, 18 plus months. And who would think that serving God could almost destroy you and destroy your marriage? And I think that sometimes we hear about serving God that, hey, life's going to be a bed of roses, that God's going to bless us and take care of us. And you know what? That is true. God does bless us. God does take care of us. But God also, listen to this, He prepares storms that are divinely created for us to make us into the individuals and the people and the ministers that He wants us to be. Amen. So that day in that boardroom, I asked my wife if she could come up. That day in that boardroom, it was like the perfect storm was brewing, a storm that would almost literally destroy our family and our marriage.
As my husband stated, that was really the toughest decision that we ever had to make in our ministry. And we've been missionaries now for 15 years. And looking back at that time, it was a very defining moment. I remember for me, it was actually February 2nd of 2018, around 2 o'clock in the morning. Weeks prior to this decision, I just remember going to bed and not being able to sleep, suffering with some insomnia. My heart would just be pounding. I would just be crying all of the time, just kind of thinking back, like, I'm never going to be able to go back and properly say goodbye to these ladies that I worked with. I'm never going to see this project to the end, this project that we poured over 8 years of our life into. And I remember on that February 2nd, at 2 o'clock in the morning, I got up. And when I got up, I was kind of jolted out of my sleep. My heart was pounding. I was in a full sweat. And I actually woke my husband up and said, babe, I'm not feeling well. Pray with me. Something's off. I don't know what's going on. It feels like my heart wants to come out of my chest. And I remember him praying with me. And then every hour for the next 4 hours, I was jolted out of my sleep. I would fall back asleep and then just be jolted out of my sleep that way. Around 6 o'clock in the morning, I remember thinking, I can't do this. Like, I ran downstairs, kind of put a blanket on the living room floor, and just began to cry out to the Lord and seek the Lord. And I was asking God, why do I feel this way? What is going on? It literally felt like I was having a heart attack. And as I sought the Lord, I was thinking back to a retreat that I had just come back from that past November, where our area director that oversees all of the missionary families in Central America had flown in, and she took all the missionary wives to this retreat. And at this retreat, she was talking about the 4 seasons of the year. And she used the 4 seasons of the year to illustrate seasons of our life. And when she got to the season of winter, I was remembering back that when she got to the season of winter and she began to describe the season of winter that sometimes comes upon our life. And I remember her talking about it, and I was sitting on the floor. We were all kind of gathered around. It was a very small group. And I just cried and cried and cried. And at that time, I realized I was in the season of winter, although I was not admitting it. I was in a season of depression. And as I thought back to that, I thought, I know what I'm going to do. That morning, I shot out a text to my fellow missionary wives and also to my area director, and I said, who's ever in town, I need you guys to come to my house and pray with me this morning. Something is wrong. I'm not feeling well. I just can't get out of this way that I'm feeling. And I remember the first person to text me back was my area director, and she said, I'm actually in town. I'm in country, because she travels all throughout Central America taking care of the missionaries. That's basically what she does. And so she said, I'm coming. I'm on my way. And 2 other of my missionary friends came that morning. And as they sat on the couch with me that morning, I remember I had a box of Kleenex. And I literally went through that whole box. In about 5 hours, we sat there, and I cried and cried. And as my area director was speaking with me, she said, Michelle, I knew you were in winter back when I came in November, and I was waiting for this call. She says to me, I knew that something was off. And she began to remind me, her and my friends that morning began to remind me, not only, Michelle, she said, did you guys have to part ways with this ministry that you had to pour out your life, that you poured out your life into, you never properly got to say goodbye. She said, Michelle, you just dropped your oldest daughter off for college. And within 3 weeks, you had to drop your oldest daughter off and be back in country in Costa Rica. 3 weeks to get her settled and then return back to the field. If you've ever dropped off a child for college, it is life-changing. It is devastating, especially when you have other kids in the home. I remember when we flew back, my youngest daughter, Isabella, she totally changed without her older sister there. It changed the family dynamics. She was more quiet, more to herself. I could tell that she was really missing her sister. She said, my area director also said, your husband, Bob, just had been diagnosed with an autoimmune disease that for over 3 years the doctors were trying to figure out what was wrong with him and why year after year he had struggled with insomnia. My husband, in this picture that you see here in this car is one of our Speed the Light vehicles that he flipped on the way to the jungle. He was the presbyter for the East Coast, but what you don't see in this picture is that one more flip to the right and he would have gone off of a cliff. He walked away from this accident without one scrape. It was the hand of God that even through this tragedy, God was saying, I got you. I have you guys. And as my area director began to remind me of all of these things that were piling up week after week, month after month, she said, Michelle, your body's reacting to all of these things that you guys have gone through. There comes a time in your body where it begins to react when there's stress and trauma and things that you go through that you don't deal with. And as she said that, she said, I think that you need to go and see a doctor. I feel like you need to go and see a doctor and see what's going on and make sure that there's nothing more to this. And I remember kind of going back and forth with her, and I really didn't want to go. I thought, I don't want to explain in Spanish, everything that I'm going through, and what's the doctor going to do? I was just really negative. And she said, I think you need to go. And that next morning, I found myself sitting in front of a doctor trying to explain my symptoms. And I told the doctor, I want you to do an EKG because it's my heart. Something's wrong with my heart. And they did the EKG. He came back. He said, no, Michelle, your heart is fine. And he began to talk with me, get more information. And he said, I'm going to print out these papers. And it's a short exam, a little test I want you to fill out. And when you do, I'll be back. And when he printed it out and put it on the table, I kind of sighed and I thought, no, this is not right. It said the Hamilton Scale of Anxiety. I had never, church, ever dealt with anxiety. I never really knew what anxiety was, never been through anxiety. I never was depressed. I never really had gone through a deep depression. And so I looked at that paper and I thought, no, this is not right. And as I began to fill out and answer the questions, it was a really short test. He came back and he totaled up my scores and he said, Michelle, your numbers are off the charts. You are struggling with panic attacks. And he explained what a panic attack was because I didn't understand what it was. And he said, I believe that you are going through a severe depression and anxiety. That's what it is. And when I looked at him, I thought, are you kidding me? Like, I'm not a depressed kind of person. I'm always upbeat. I'm an extrovert. I'm a people person. That's not me. And I was going back and forth with him, and he said, I really feel like we need to start you on medication. But what he didn't know at that moment, I thought, no. He didn't realize that my background, for me, all medications were bad. Because I grew up in a house where I watched my sister and my mom in drug addiction. I watched my sister in a heroin addiction for many, many years. As you saw in that video, I lost my brother who had become a drug dealer and was involved in the drug scene as well. And I watched my mom in addiction year in and year out. And so for me, when I looked at any kind of drug or medication, I thought, no, I don't want to go down that road. I thought it was just a bad road. It wasn't for me. And so I walked out of that doctor's office and I said, it's too scary. I don't want to do that. I went home, and church, I want to let you know that within 3 weeks, I was back sitting with that doctor. I had not been able to sleep. Night after night, that same thing kept happening over and over again. And I was in full depression and anxiety. And when I sat before that doctor again, I said, all right, I give in. I need to sleep. I need help. And I want to tell you that was the beginning of my journey with mental illness. And it was a long journey. I can't tell you that I was healed from that moment on. I want to let you know that it was 10 long months of trying to figure out how to get better. Trying to figure out, God, please deliver me from this. Why are you taking me down this road? I don't understand. I was fasting. I was praying. I was seeking the Lord. But God had a purpose, even in this that I went through. Even in this difficult time, God had a purpose. In October of that year, after 10 long months, my air director stepped back in and she said, we received 3 phone calls on your behalf. 3 separate people that know you called Assemblies of God World Missions to report that Michelle needs to be taken off of the field. There is something off with her. And she said, Michelle, I've watched you struggle month after month, and you're not getting better. At this point, I had lost over 15 pounds. I was very thin. I was not eating properly, couldn't keep food down. I was just so lost. I could not get better, no matter what they gave me. And the psychiatry, I realized in Costa Rica, wasn't really working. It was not working, what they were giving me. And she said, Michelle, I have 2 options for you. Either your family's going to have to leave and go back and return to New Jersey, where I don't really know what kind of help you're going to get and if you're going to get better. And she said, or I found another option for you, and it's a place called Honey Lake Clinic in Tallahassee, Florida, where you can go and do a 30-day mental health intake. And as she sat across the table from me, I thought, are you kidding me? No way, I'm not leaving my family, my husband and my youngest daughter that's already struggling in Costa Rica and leaving for 30 days to take care of myself. And as moms, we know that we are always taking care of everybody else. But self-care, oftentimes, for mothers and for women in general, is very, very difficult. And so as I look back at that season in my life, I remember I walked upstairs and I thought, I don't want to do this. I can't do this. I can't do this. And I didn't know that my youngest daughter at that time had been watching my every move. She walked upstairs to my room. She grabbed me and she said, Mom, you're going. You are going to this place. I will be fine. I know how to cook. I can cook for myself. Dad here. You got this, Mom. You have to go. She said, I want my mom back. She said, you're not my mom. I want my mom back. And I feel that this is the door that God is opening. She got a suitcase out of my closet, brought it into my room, and began to pack it for me as I sat on the bed like a zombie. And as I watched my daughter pack my suitcase, she took out a little sticky notepad and she began to write scripture on that sticky note. She began to write phrases like, Mom, you got this. Mom, God's going to deliver you. Mom, you're going to come back stronger. Every day that I was at that place, I had a sticky note that I would find in my suitcase for my daughter. And church, I want to let you know that that was the most difficult 30 days of my entire life. But I want to also let you know that on October 19th, 19 days after being at this place, I opened up my journal and I began to write, Lord, today you have restored to me the joy of my salvation.
Amen.
You brought me here to this place to heal my heart. I now see that you wanted me all to yourself. I feel free today, free to dance, free to laugh. Yes, laugh, something that the enemy had tried to rob from me. It has all been a long road, but you never, ever left my side. You were here all along. You even sent friends here to this place to visit me. My mind is at peace, just as your word said it would be. And then I wrote a scripture here that I had repeated night after night, hundreds of times, every night that I could not sleep, surrounded by anxiety and insomnia. Night after night, I repeated, you will keep in perfect peace all whose minds are stayed on you because they trust in you. Isaiah 26:3. It's a verse that I would repeat night after night after night. But this time when I wrote it in the journal, I knew that I was healed. I knew that God had delivered me. Okay, that's a verse.
Yeah.
I don't know why that's doing that. It's on AirDrop. Okay. It's not even on. Okay. Scratch that. Okay. So that totally took me out of my place. Oh, so at this time when I was there, I wrote in my journal and I remember thinking back to that verse that the Lord had, that scripture that the Lord had given me at that time in my life. And when I looked back at that 30 days, it was more than what we had been through with the foundation. It was more than that separation. During that time that I was there, I actually had a flashback of when I was a little girl, of things that the Lord had to show me that I had been through, sexual abuse that I had totally blocked. And friends, I want to let you know that for me, that journey wouldn't be possible. I wouldn't be standing here if it wasn't because of prayers of churches like this that pray for their missionaries. So I want to encourage you, do not forget to pray for your missionaries, but only, not us, those pastors, your pastors, those in ministry at this church, they covet and need your prayers. The enemy would want nothing more than to take us out. Amen. So I want to encourage you not to stop praying for your leaders and those in ministry all over the world and even in the U.S. Amen.
Amen.
You know, my wife, she went through this time of struggle, right? And 20 years earlier, I got hit by a bus, and I had traumatic brain injury. And like most guys, right, we grow up, we don't want anything to do with emotions. We're taught not to connect with our emotions. And, I love what the writer of Proverbs says in Proverbs chapter 13. He goes, the fire tests, as it says here in the next slide, fire tests the purity of silver and gold, but the Lord tests the heart. And God put us through this time of testing. It was like, God, you're nowhere to be found. I mean, what's going on? And so 20 years ago, I get this traumatic brain injury, and I'm like so disconnected from my emotions, and I struggle to connect with my emotions, and my wife's going through this difficult time, and she just needs her husband to talk to him. It's like he's absent, and he's not there, and just, it created these difficulties in our marriage, and these challenges between us and things that we had to overcome. When we came home to the United States, and we had to go to mandated counseling. I didn't want to go to counseling, but we had to go to couples counseling, individuals counseling. And guys, you're going to love this, right? And so I go to this counseling. I don't want to go to all I think is the TV, right? You're laying on the couch, and how do you feel? And you're talking about how you feel. And here's the thing is, guys, we all have pretty much one emotion. Most guys, if you say, what emotion are you feeling? What emotion is that? What emotion is this? And every emotion kind of seems to be tied to one emotion, anger. That's all we ever know as guys. And so I didn't know any way to really express myself. And I get with this counselor, and she makes me have this thing called a feelings journal. And she's like, okay, so various times a day you got to write down how you feel. But not only that, you got to say where you feel it in your body. I'm like, what in the world are you talking about? Where do I feel it in my body? And there's all these things that we're having to do in this counseling. And it was one of these times. It was just so difficult. But my pastor in Pensacola, New Jersey, always says this. He goes, God's got answers. And he does. Because he's a way maker. Now, I'd like to invite the musicians, if you could come up and just help me. I'd like if we could just maybe play that song, Waymaker. And I want to unpack this maybe in a way that you guys can understand. I had no idea why God put us through what he put us through until the morning of June the 8th, 2019. And I don't know that I could really understand the truth behind this song, Waymaker, until that day, June 8th, 2019. And I think if you guys, in order for you to really understand what I want to share with you, I think that if you could go with me, the book of 2 Kings in chapter 4. 2 Kings in chapter 4, beginning in verse number 8. And the story talks about a Shunammite woman. And a prophet comes to visit the Shunammite woman. And it says here in 2 Kings chapter 4, number 8. It goes, one day Elisha the prophet went to the town of Shunem. And there was a wealthy woman that lived there. And it says she urged him. Can you say that with me this morning? Say she urged him. She urged him that he would come to her home for a meal. And whenever he passed that way, he would stop there for something to eat. And so the Bible tells us that she recognizes who this man of God is. She recognizes who Elisha is, the prophet. And every time he comes away, she goes, won't you come to my house for a meal? I want to bless you. I want to do something to help you and just take care of your needs. And he began to learn, through this one event and through so many events in his life, that God truly is a way maker. And so he goes and he stops there for a meal. And so one day he's talking to his servant Gehazi. You'll read a little further on in the passage here. There's a verse that says she doesn't have a son. You see, the two of them are talking, Gehazi and Elijah. And he's like, how can I bless this woman? Look what she's done for me. Look how she's taking care of me. And the servant Gehazi says, look, she doesn't have a son. And her husband's old. In that culture, the worst thing you could be was a woman without a child. A barren woman. And he goes, she doesn't have a child. And what if we pray for her? I don't know, throw a bucket of oil on her and do whatever it is that God does to do miracles. I mean, we can pray for her. She can have a son. And so it says in the next verse that she gets in the doorway with the prophet Elisha. And he goes to her, next year at this time, you are going to have a baby. And here's what blows me away. You would think that she would jump up and down and shout and scream, God's going to give you a baby. The prophet of God has spoken. But here's the thing. She goes back to him. She goes, no, my Lord. Look, I wasn't there, and the Bible can't really tell us how it happened. But I'm almost positive that the scream, but no! Come on, my Lord, don't deceive me. Don't get my hopes up like that. But here's the thing. The very next year, she has a baby. And the thing is, when you walk with God, there's unexpected things that happen. You know, my wife, she's standing up there sharing, and my telephone starts ringing. And she's like, why is your phone ringing? It's on airplane mode. I got no idea why your phone's ringing. But what she doesn't know is I'm sitting in the chair and I'm fiddling with my watch. And I lose stuff a lot. So my watch is connected to my phone. And if I push a button, you know what happens? My phone rings. And so I'm sitting in the chair fiddling with my watch. And I make my phone ring. And I don't even know that I made my phone ring. And she's like, why in the world is this phone ringing? And you know what? Unexpected things happen. Sometimes you've got no idea why. So this lady has a child that she never asked for. But here's the thing, if you read further on in the passage, it says that one day when the child was older, he died. And this was one of those moments where I'm sure she didn't understand God. She had no idea what God was up to. I mean, look, she never asked for a child. Even though in her heart that that's what she wanted, she never asked God for a child. And the moment the prophet comes and says, look, you're going to have a baby, she gives birth. And she's thinking, God, man, he just did an incredible miracle. What does he do? The baby grows up and dies. My wife would tell you if she were here at this moment that she never wanted to be connected with human trafficking, sexual exploitation, and God opens his door, he puts in his thing in our lap, and things are just perfect. Until one day, the ground was just ripped out from underneath of us. And it was almost like that baby that God had given us now. Because of life, our marriage, our struggles, and all the things we went through was like, God, I don't even know if I can be a missionary anymore. I don't even know if I can continue in ministry. It's hard. And I think about this woman. She didn't know this song, Waymaker. And I don't know that she understood it. But there must have been something in the back of her head that was like, you know, this God, he is a waymaker. She goes to the prophet and she's like, look, you gave me a baby, you prayed for me, I had a child, and the child dies, and I'm sure she threw herself on the ground and she's weeping and she's crying. And so the prophet comes and he prays for the boy. The boy comes back to life. And he goes, I want you to go away for 7 years because there's going to be a famine in the land. Go away for 7 years and then you can come back. And, you know, God is just amazing in the way he works. And she had no idea why her son died. She had no idea why the prophet had to pray for him to come back to life. She goes away for 7 years. There's a famine. And she comes back in 7 years. And it was that, at that very moment, that she understood. This is a verse I like. 2 Kings 8:5, it says, at that very moment, you see what happens is the prophet's servant is in the king's throne room, and he's sharing the testimony of the woman who had a child who died and came back to life. And it says that at that very moment, the woman came into the throne room when the servant was sharing the testimony. And the king couldn't really be the woman that had the miracle. Could it really be that it did take place, that this God really is a way maker? And at that very moment, she comes into the throne room, and the king's like, is that you? Did that really happen? And here's what he goes. She tells a story, and he directs his officials to see that everything she lost was restored to her, including those crops harvested during her absence. I'd like to ask if we could maybe cut the transmission, the recording. And I want to share something with you.